Hello and welcome back to Death and Taxes, your weekly live stream podcast from the Australian Taxpayers Alliance. I am one half of your hosting duo, John Humphreys, and joined, as always, by Gene Tunney. Gene, how you doing?
Very well, John. Yes, getting on top of things. How about yourself?
Generally doing well, Gene, although not enamored with the results from last night. Don't know if you're
Right.
a rugby man, but it was we'd set up the big screen out on the back paddock, and we had a projector on the big screen around the fire. And my 7-year-old was having his birthday, and he invited his friends over, and so a big do.
Yeah.
And then the Queensland team chose not to give my 7-year-old a birthday present, or at least the ref certainly didn't. So yes,
Oh,
but
well,
that notwithstanding, Gene, doing very
yep.
well, top of the world.
Okay. Very good. In paradise, living in paradise.
Another beautiful day in paradise, indeed.
Yeah.
Indeed. So we do not have a guest for you today, so you are stuck with Gene and I. It is your pleasure to be stuck with Gene and I for this session. We are going to be talking about the Senate composition. I think it's underappreciated, doesn't get enough attention. We're going to be talking about housing, a perennial topic in politics these days. We are going to be talking about Angus Taylor's recent swipe at One Nation and that contest. And we're going to be looking at some recent decisions regarding labour markets, industrial relations. Quite a dry topic, but an important one if you care about that key word that we always say, productivity. So we've got that and more to unpack today. Firstly, run you through the normal introductory stuff. This is brought to you by the Australian Taxpayers Alliance. You can find us at taxpayers.org.au and on Substack at taxpayers.substack.com. Please go there, have a look around, and if you like what we're doing, consider becoming a financial member. Just a couple of dollars a month helps us keep the lights on. This live stream is being simulcast on Facebook, YouTube, and X, and we later put it up on Substack and Rumble. It also goes to LinkedIn via Gene's account. Wherever you're watching it, can we please ask you to give it a like, give it a share, and can you please go around onto all those platforms and give us a follow? It really does help to tell the algorithm that this is what people need to see. So that's very much appreciated. This is live. You'll see our mistakes as we make them. You also have the opportunity to write in, say hello, give us your comments, and we can have a chat with you as we go. Comments, questions, criticisms, we'll put some of the comments up as we go, but we tend to save some for the end as well, where we engage in some Q&A. So feel free to get involved that way. With all of that said and out of the way, our first substantive issue is normally, and it will be today, Gene's Roundup. If you're a normal person, you're probably not spending each day studying the economic news of the day because you're normal. Thankfully for you, we are not. You can come here and for 10 minutes a week, catch up on all of the economic news of the week that you should know. With that said, Gene, what is it we should know?
Thanks, John. Well, I think we're all aware that, the ceasefire seems to be over. Hostilities have resumed. The oil price is going back up. It jumped about, around 8% over the last week, and trading around 76, 77 US a barrel versus 70 toward the end of last week and early this week. So we've got the resumption of hostilities there, and I was hopeful that it would hold. But it looks. Here, from what I can tell, it seems that the Iranians are being, they are playing silly buggers in a way and causing trouble. So it's not. It doesn't seem to be Trump's fault. It seems to be the fault of Iran, and we'll just have to see how that all plays out. But yeah, very disappointing that oil price is on the way back up. And
I might jump in there. I know we normally let you
go
there, but I think it won't be worth coming back in later. And I want a slight pushback on the interpretation there for events. Iran is clearly not allowing tankers to go through the Omani corridor.
Yes.
to get out. And I guess people can sort of squint and squibble about the way things were written down. I think Iran's perspective, if I may play devil's advocate,
You may defend the mullahs.
the MOU be saying that they get to control, they won't charge anything for 2 months, but they get to control the exports through there.
Yeah.
Strategically, it'd be, and this, I'm not Robinson Crusoe here, I'm not the first one to comment on this. The idea that Iran is trying to create a situation that it becomes much more painful to attack them, because they go through a regular thing where every couple of years they get bombed. Every couple of years they get attacked. And to us, it's all quite academic because they're a different country. You know, there's dragons out there. They're foreigners and they're very foreign and they're very far away. So they're not us, and who cares? If you were in a country that was being regularly attacked, you might start to create a system for how could we discourage other countries from attacking us? And I think they have established that if they don't create a strong deterrence and, you know, assert their control over the Strait of Hormuz, they run the risk that Trump gets bored, he goes away, 6 months later, he's angry, he bombs them again. He gets bored, he goes away, 12 months later, he's angry, he bombs them again. Because remember, 12 months ago, he bombed them and totally destroyed their nuclear program that we had to reinvade them for 6 months later. So from their perspective, they needed to create this deterrence. And part of it in their mind is control over the Straits of Hormuz, and America is finding workarounds. And so they've come back and said, no, wait, we're drawing a line here. Remember, you attacked us. You started the war. You don't get to sook and complain that it's ending not the way you like. I'm sorry, was there something wrong with the war you ordered? I think is the meme. Right. Yeah, look, Iran's is needling here by attacking those ships. And America is responding by, as they said, responding 20 times stronger than Iran. And in both of cases, I think the relevant context is none of this would be happening if the war hadn't started. And you can understand why the attacked country might be getting their hackles up occasionally.
Yes, I mean, look, I mean, none of this would have started if we didn't have this crazy Islamic fundamentalist regime in Tehran. None of this would have started if Iran wasn't exporting terrorism all around the world. So, I mean, we can
start with both of those. I mean, by far the bigger exports of terrorism are the Muslim countries America is allied with. I agree they're Islamist. When you say they're crazy, every one of their behaviors has been like absurdly rational. And we can call them crazy because we don't like them and they wear funny clothes and they believe in the wrong religion. I get all of that. I think their religion is wrong and a bit dumb. I'm sorry if there's Muslims out there. I don't agree with you. But their behavior has been like almost autistically rational. So crazy, I don't think's right. Major sponsors of terror, I don't think they show up on the top 20 list. And we're not bombing the other 19. I think we've got an idea where we wanted to attack them and we worked out backwards. What are the stuff we have to say to the gullible public to get them to agree with our war? I'm not sure there was a great rationalization for this war. We could have just not done it. That would have been the other option.
Yeah, look, I mean, maybe we'll have to come back to this. Look, certainly, I think this. I was surprised when this war started, and I was concerned that maybe it was covering up for. It was a distraction from the Epstein scandal, that it's a bit of a wag the dog. So, yeah, I mean, the justification for it is a bit thin, but I don't think we should be under any... I mean, I think Iran, to an extent, a conflict with Iran, given the regime in power, was probably inevitable at some stage and all of the trouble that it is causing around the world. I mean, mate, is it in the... So what were you saying? You think there's 19 other countries that are
well, just in terms of major
trouble?
sponsors of terror, there's plenty of other countries that were much higher up on that list. I mean, there's never been a Shiite, there's never been an Iran-backed terror attack in the West, for instance. And you hear about Muslim terror attacks in the West all the time. They're all Sunni, right? They're all the Sunni radicals that do those attacks on Western shores. And we see all of those Sunni terror attacks and we turn around and go, whew, we better go after those Shia. I mean, it seems to me like the leaders of our countries know that if you say Muslim terrorist, people get grumpy, and they know that most people can't distinguish between a Sunni and a Shia. That most people can't distinguish in the West between a Persian and an Arab. I mean, in that part of the world, the distinction is crucial, right? It's like mistaking an Aussie for a Kiwi. It's a very different thing. It's a bigger difference than that. But they know most people aren't going to draw the distinction. So they point to a bunch of Sunni terrorist attacks done by Arabs, and they say, we better go after these Persian Shiites. I think it's a little bit convenient. I mean, if we just basically kept to the JCPOA, I don't see why there would be a need for conflict. And since we're basically trending back towards Trump begging them for the JCPOA again, it's not clear to me any of this was justifiable.
Yeah.
That, by the way, context there, JCPOA was the old deal that the US and Europe and China and Russia and Iran had come to keep Iran's nuclear program in check, to ensure that it just stayed for civilian use only. And look, you could say that needed to be amended. Fine, amend it. But instead, Trump threw it out. And now basically we're ending up in the same place, just with a lot more death, destruction, high oil prices, and a war. So
yes, yeah, that is true. I probably, in terms of Iran, I mean, they've been supporting Hezbollah, haven't they, in Lebanon? And
that's true. Yeah, I mean, most countries have allies. I've always found it odd that Iran is condemned for trying to have allies with people that also like Iran back. So yes, it's true that Iran has allies. They are guilty as charged.
Well, okay. Well, should we move on? I mean,
anyway, I don't want to get distraction.
No, it was good point to make. I mean, I've had you push back on my simplistic interpretation of events. I mean, I just had a look at it and thought, look, I mean, I can understand that. It makes sense. Iran's just decided to, cause more trouble and try and take advantage of the situation. And because I thought it's in the US's interest to end this, to have the ceasefire. And I mean, Trump doesn't want this being prolonged and then affecting how the GOP goes in the midterms. They're already going to get smashed.
Right, I agree with that absolutely. I think that's kind of the point, right? So the US and Israel chose to start this war. Iran didn't. If you'd given them all a vote the day before the war, Iran would have ticked the no war box, but they weren't given a vote. They got attacked. And I think during the war, it became clear that the US was not going to be able to achieve their goals. They could not reopen the Straits of Hormuz through the war. They could not achieve regime change. They didn't seem they could blow up Iran's Navy and Air Force. They didn't really have a Navy and Air Force, but I guess we could keep repeating that 5 times every night and feel good about ourselves. So it looked like the US wasn't going to be able to achieve any of their goals. And then the world was running low on fertilizer and oil supply, and America was coming up to the midterms, their election. So clearly America needed out of the war. Having not chosen the war, it's not clear Iran needed out of the war. So they could just say, you picked this war. Sure, we want a peace deal. We can have a peace deal, US. You surrender. Now, obviously, the US, Trump's not going to surrender. But when you look at the balance there of who's achieving their goals, Iran's goal was to not have your regime toppled. They achieved their goal. And then if you want peace and a negotiation, all right, well, what's the settlement? Iran said, all right, we'll settle. We want control of the Straits of Hormuz. And the MOU kind of said that. And then America's come back in and said, oh, look, we agreed to a peace because we need peace. But I tell you what, you're not getting some of the things we put in the deal. Like, we're not stopping the war in Lebanon. We're not letting you control the Straits of Hormuz. We're backtracking on our deal. Iran, why don't you just cop it? Because, you kind of won the war, but we get to push you around anyway. And Iran responded with, well, we don't see it that way. If you're not going to come to the table the way we expected, then we could go on fighting if you like. But America does not want to. So what are they going to do next?
Yeah.
Anyway, apologies for that long sidetrack.
No. It's all good discussion. Righto. So that's the oil price. The other thing I've been tracking internationally, and this is in the context of, well, we know that the global economy is underperforming. The IMF has revised down its estimates of global growth just a smidge from 3.1 to 3% this year. They've revised down Australia a little bit too. But there are a couple of countries that are just absolutely shooting the lights out at the moment due to the AI boom. I learned this recently. I mean, look at these numbers for exports in US dollars for Taiwan and South Korea, where we're looking at exports in the last over the last year and a half, just almost doubling. It's just extraordinary growth, and it's all due to the semiconductors that are needed for the chips, and it's part of this AI data center boom where they need all of these chips to put in the server racks or whatever they do, and in these data centers to run all the AI queries. And so both Taiwan and South Korea just having this extraordinary run in terms of exports. So I was really impressed by that. Of course, it does make you wonder about the sustainability of this AI boom and whether we're exactly. That's we've got RW AI Podsy. And whether it is like some previous booms where we have this big rush of enthusiasm and there's a whole lot of construction and building, and then suddenly there's the realization that, oh, hang on, maybe all of these stories, all of this narrative we're telling ourselves about how everything's going to be different, okay, that maybe there's something to it, but it's not going to be as transformational as we thought, and then everything falls apart. And then, I mean, you've overinvested, and so you may have a period where you've got no one's investing because there's already plenty of capacity. But anyway, for now, Japan, Taiwan and South Korea have been just reaping the benefits, and it just goes to show what good policies in both of those countries, I think, over the years have managed to achieve good education policies, openness to trade. So, well done to both of them. The other, and the final thing I'd like to touch on, John, is just the figures for dwelling constructions, because we know in Australia we've got this ongoing problem of not enough supply of housing relative to current demand, which has made housing unaffordable for many. We've got, house prices there's a bit of a correction at the moment, but even after the correction, house prices to median incomes will still be much higher than in many other parts of the world. We're simply not building enough houses. If you look at the quarterly data, so this chart here, I've got dwelling starts on a quarterly basis, and that's in the light, or whatever that shade of green is. And then in the navy, we have the dwelling starts. No, they're the completions, sorry. What we need to be doing consistently on a quarterly basis is hitting the 60,000 line here. And we're just not doing that with either the starts or the completions. There may be some quarters where we have more starts than that. So there, for example, and that was because there would have been a number of big apartment buildings that were started in that quarter, and that pushed up that number temporarily. But we should be hitting that. We should be roughly there all the time. We're just not there all the time. We're not commencing enough, or we're not starting enough new building. We're not completing it. So, okay, we know that. But what's extraordinary is that we're basically at record levels of houses under construction in Australia, or dwellings under construction. At the moment, we've got nearly 250,000 dwellings being constructed. And how do you get your head around the fact that we're not approving enough, we're not completing enough, but we have lots of houses under construction? And the way that you reconcile these facts is that the time that it takes to complete the apartments and the houses has increased over the last 10 years. It takes much longer, particularly for apartments. And this must be related to all sorts of things, such as just there being fewer sites that are suitable for apartments, or there's so much of the city that's zoned so you can't build apartments, and there are all of these restrictions on what you can do, and you've also got issues with particular unions that may cause trouble. So there are all sorts of reasons our productivity, our ability to build houses and apartments and townhouses in particular quickly, that's fallen. So the time it takes to build these dwellings has increased, and this is at the same time that the composition of our dwelling stock, because of where we allow development and the fact that we're running out of greenfield space, there's not as much greenfield space as there once was, or it's not available for development. We've moved more towards the attached housing, or the what's the word for it? The apartments and townhouses. So that's in the pink or magenta line there. You see how that's become a much more significant part of overall building approvals, and then buildings completed, constructed dwellings completed. Whereas houses, they're sort of roughly, if you could look at that, it's fairly, it sort of cycles around a certain level. But we've got these, apartments and townhouses becoming much more significant, and they take longer to build. You would have seen that previous slide. That's the number of quarters. And so you see that a house, you can build that one house in around 3 quarters, so around 9 months. A townhouse, it takes 4 quarters, 1 year. And now for apartments, they're taking around 9 quarters just to get one apartment. So this relates to just how all the issues with building these large apartment towers that we're having now. And that, John, is why I think we've got this problem. We've got a lot of dwellings under construction, but we're just not as good as getting them finished and getting people living in them as we once were. Certainly not as quickly. And this is a big part of the challenge that we've got at the moment in providing affordable housing. So any questions or thoughts on any of that, John?
Well, some of this goes back to with the conversation we've had before, just about the regulations that are faced by builders and developers that are inevitably going to slow down the process. And look, the time it takes to get some approvals. I was chatting to a developer, I think a week or two ago, who was telling me he got used to the idea that it would have to take him years to battle through the paperwork. But he's looking at a project now that he's about to give up on, that it's taken him nearly 10 years. And that is trying to get the approvals and then passing the next test and passing the next test. And some of the tests will be necessary and some will take time. But I mean, they're taking the piss now. It's some of these processes really are slowing it down. And look, slowing it down is the same thing as increasing its cost, right? It's the same thing as making them harder, lower availability for the people who need the houses. So I'm not surprised. The other thing that I took from this, and this is one of my little non-libertarian bugbears, or I have a very strong opinion about something that's not related to just getting the government out of the way. The government should get out of the way, but I'm also a big fan of houses over apartments. I think that is, it has been a strategic mistake for our civilization to be trending ever more towards the smaller blocks of land closer to the main CBDs. For one thing, it is, and you'd know, a passion topic of mine is the falling fertility rate and the coming collapse in human population. And there's very few things that have been consistently linked to that falling fertility. There's lots of theories, lots of very convenient theories, but only a few things that are consistently linked. And one seems to be just access to space. So apartments over housing. So more houses. I think it's just a better lifestyle as well. Let the kids run around. Have more kids and then let the kids run around in a backyard. So not only do I now have that old argument, I can point to the data you've given me here and say, and the apartments, not only do they not give you enough space and they cram you all in like sardines, they take longer to build anyway.
Yeah.
And speeding up that process of building would be good for housing availability.
Well, I think we were very good at building those brick veneer homes back in the day in the 80s and 90s. If you think about all of the big housing estates that were built back then, all of the housing, Forest Lake or out around Logan, and I suppose Springfield in a way in the 2000s and 2010s, but Ripley. We're still doing it, but I just don't think there's not as many of those greenfield opportunities now, and we're having to build more of the apartment towers. And yeah, they're like, we've talked about the issues with those and how they just seem to take a lot longer.
When you say there's a lack of greenfield, what do you mean by that? I mean, Australia still has plenty of land, plenty of fields that are green.
Well, I mean, they've tried to constrain the development, so they're only allowing new residential estates in certain areas. There was a deliberate decision to encourage more development in a city, or the infill. That's the idea. Yeah. So
you're talking about zoning laws. The zoning laws are limiting access to green fields rather than the green fields actually not being there. Yeah.
Yeah. So
I think there are. Go ahead.
Yeah, so there is still some greenfield, but it's not as much as it was. I mean, we're not developing, say, whole new suburbs or whole new parts of the city, like the Centenary suburbs when they developed that, and they must have developed that in the 60s and 70s. We are developing sort of out toward Ipswich in this western corridor, but I just don't think we're developing in the same way as we did, or we don't have as liberal policies as we did, say, 50 years ago. They've deliberately chosen to restrict the development, the greenfield development in new areas, and to focus more on what they call the infill. The problem with the infill is that brings out the NIMBYs, and then the Brisbane City Council will go, oh, hang on, well, yeah, this is politically damaging. Let's restrict the townhouses in a lot of our suburbs, and let's try to limit the infill to certain areas too. So they're just constricting the range of places where you can build, and that reduces the places where it's or the development opportunities. Yeah, I think we've probably talked about that enough. I mean, all the issues.
Well, firstly, check. There's some good comments coming in, but I got to say, look, I've evolved on this a little bit. I have a bit more sympathy for the NIMBYs than I used to, but I think there is a way to square the circle. Look, as you were saying, one of the consequences of not allowing this growing out is you try to do the infill developments, and then you run into the NIMBYs. To some degree, there's an argument to be made that you buy into a commons. Right. There actually used to be literal contracts that you could buy into. When you bought a house, you're also buying into a contract. And that contract stipulated that there would be a park down the road because, you want your kids to have a park that they could go to. And so you're buying that in as a part of your contract. If you bought into that and then later someone said, oh, I'm knocking down the park. It's like, wait a second, I bought into a contract that said I'm buying this house with access to the park down the road. So there is a case to be made for something like that. Look, I don't think we need to totally discount the concerns of the people worried about the quality of life near them, because I refuse to believe that there is nowhere in the country where you can find a group of people who would say, I tell you what, I'll cash in. I'll convert my house and my neighbor's house and that house. I'll knock down that park and we'll build, more houses here. There are going to be people who want to take that opportunity. It seems to me the problem we have is that local councils, which, hashtag abolish local councils, but, local councils are dedicated to seeing the world through what is basically, it sounds like hyperbole, a Soviet lens. And what I mean by that is not that they randomly kill people. What I mean is that it must be centrally planned, right? This idea that you build a city, it must be centrally planned. You need to know what goes where and when and why and who and how. And you have to have a very smart controller in a room surrounded by smart advisors working out the plan for where it'll be. You can look at this now. Go to your local council, look it up. They'll have a plan for the roads they're going to build in 15 years, going out to suburbs, to cities that they're going to build in 25 years, right? And if it's not according to their plan, God help you trying to get your development up.
Yeah.
Right? And so I think the problem is that that they create this constrained, micromanaged plan, and then when their micromanaged plan runs into NIMBYs, sometimes the NIMBYs are being unreasonable, sometimes they might have a point. And we're given this option of either you just sort of plow through the central planner's plan, or you listen to the NIMBYs. There's got to be another way, right? There's got to be other ways to develop other than this centrally planned model. And look, some of the best cities in the world are haphazard and inefficient, but they weren't planned, and some of them have great culture. So a lot of people travel from all around the world to visit Rome, right? And the Roman streets are ridiculous and they're a mess, but the sort of the ambience and the culture there, the vibe of the city still attracts people. I think we could do better if we just allowed a bit more spontaneous order, so to speak, and not worry that everything is perfectly planned by some two-bit local council bureaucrat.
Yep. Here.
Some comments that were coming in here from some people on housing while we're going. 2 houses knocked down over my back fence, finished about 6 weeks ago, nothing started. I think that was in response to someone was saying the demolitions. Or the housing demolitions to build new stock, but still to be built. They're knocking down houses to build houses, but they haven't got around to the building. So I think that's what Lyndon was responding to. RW again, I bought a removal home recently. The hardwood in it had to be pre-drilled for any nails bought recently to penetrate it.
Right. Yeah.
All right. Good wood back in the day.
Well, cheap nails nowadays, I suppose.
Wow. Cheap everything.
Yeah.
It's not what it used to be. You know, we're getting old enough to say that, Gene. Back in my day, I had to walk through the snow for 10 kilometers to get to school.
Indeed, yeah. All right.
Last comment on this one then from Lyndon. The building code of Australia has been meddled with continually. It's supposed to have an independent board, so how come police say they're going to change it? I have no answer. I have no answer except that maybe it should just be a smaller document to start with. It would be my instinct. All right, Ted. That's the end of your roundup?
Indeed.
Well, then, I have a question for you. In the Australian today, there was an op-ed by Angus Taylor, which is apparently based off a speech he gave to the Sydney Institute recently, where he rips in to Pauline Hanson and One Nation. So this is, of course, the Liberal opposition leader, Liberals collapsing in the polls, One Nation going through the roof, this earthquake on the right side of Australian politics, where it looks like there's a risk that the Liberal national parties might be in the process of being replaced by One Nation as Australia's right-wing party, something that hasn't happened, changing our right-wing party since World War II, basically when Menzies, shortly after World War II, Menzies set up the Liberal Party. So it's an earthquake happening. Angus Taylor has decided to respond. He's come out swinging. He's made the case that One Nation is a one-person band that doesn't have well-thought-out policies, and what policies they have will send the country bankrupt. Gene, I believe you've seen this. What do you make of this? Both its accuracy, its tactical wisdom, its strategic wisdom. What do you make of Angus's attack on One Nation?
Look, whether it's true or not, I mean, it may well be. But we've still got to see how they perform in government. I mean, he's obviously pointing to a range of policies and commitments relating to, I suppose it must be regional infrastructure and all sorts of things, and some of their tax policies. But I don't think it's going to resonate. I don't think it's very effective, and he's wasting his breath and his ammunition, because the enemy, from his point of view, is the government. It's not Pauline Hanson. He may have to ally himself with Pauline Hanson. The Liberals and the Nationals may have end up in some sort of alliance or coalition with One Nation if they're ever going to beat Labor. At the moment, all of this dispute on the right, this fight on the right, is benefiting the Labor Party. So I don't think it's smart politics from Angus Taylor at all. Now, the issue is that even if he gets replaced by Andrew Hastie has similarly strong views against One Nation, doesn't he? So getting rid of Angus Taylor is not going to help. I really think it's not smart. He should be turning his attention to the government. The government is exposed on so many issues. It's mucked up its budget. The budget was a disaster. Jim Chalmers looks hollow now. He was riding high. He was seen as future Prime Minister, but now he's just seen as he's what's the word? Washed up, or maybe not quite washed up, but people are starting to see through the spin. They're starting to wonder whether he does have the substance that's required of a treasurer. He's certainly no Paul Keating. And the government is just extremely exposed. And Taylor's attacking One Nation? Doesn't make any sense to me. What do you think?
I'm not sure I agree. It is the conventional wisdom that, clearly One Nation's been playing on this. I think you mentioned before we came on air, Barnaby Joyce has done quite well at directing his fire at Labor. And that is a smart thing to do when you're winning. The thing is, what the Liberals are slowly bleeding all of their support to One Nation. At this point, people are starting to see One Nation as the most stark contrast with Labor. I mean, the advantage the Liberals used to always have is no matter how much people didn't like them, if you could draw a contrast with the other team, Labor, then people would sort of come back home to the anti-Labor party. They may be losing that, right? They're at the risk of losing their status as the anti-Labor party. And if all they do is establish that Labor is really, really bad, I think the people voting either Liberal or One Nation already agree with that. And at the moment, they're saying, yes, Labor's bad, and I prefer One Nation to the Liberals. And if all the Liberals do is come back and say, yeah, Labor's bad, they haven't finished the explanation yet. I mean, they're losing people from the Liberals to One Nation. They need to make the case for why people, from their perspective, should go back to them. And if they have never anything negative to say about One Nation, like if they knock it out of the park and convince more people to not vote Labor, it's not clear to me that that's going to bring anyone back to the Liberals now, given this shift that is on. So I think they've kind of been forced to take on One Nation, I think, at some point, and it's going to be a two-edged sword. So I don't know what else they could do, right? But I mean, when they do take on One Nation, it's going to look bad because One Nation's going to be able to respond with very reasonably exactly what you said. Stop attacking us. We're not the enemy. Labor's the enemy. And One Nation will look good when they say that. But I don't know what choice he had. He framed that article as you've got three options. There's three options here. The country's broken. If you want it to stay broken, vote for Labor. I understand you're angry. So if you want to burn the whole thing down, vote for One Nation. But if you want to fix the place without burning it down, vote for us. And I don't know if it'll work, but I'm not convinced there were many other options available to them.
But he should be stating what his plan is. He should be stating why people should vote for his party and why they should. Yeah, what is he offering? I mean, I don't see how saying, oh, well, One Nation, they've got a bunch of crazy policies, they're going to spend too much money, and we're going to end up with higher interest rates, more debt. Okay, I mean, that's possible. I mean, I think it'll be interesting if One Nation got into power. I think I said a while back it'd be like a right-wing Whitlam government in a way. It could be like that. I mean, it could just be. It could be extremely interesting. But one thing that Sinclair Davidson said on Twitter, or X, which I thought was a rather astute observation, he said, "Look, I think it was something along these lines. I can't remember exactly, but Sink was saying, oh, look, we know it's going to be an absolute, train wreck to begin with, but everyone's just fed up, or a lot of people are fed up with the status quo, with what they see as the uni party, that they just really want to metaphorically burn it all down. And that's what's driving a lot of the One Nation."
I agree. And then if that's true and you're the Liberals, just complaining about Labor again, like you always have in the past, how does that get those people to vote for you? I mean, it seems to me, look, I'm not convinced it's accurate. We'd have to see the numbers. And of course, they'll gild the lily because they're playing politics. But it seems to me that the tactic of saying One Nation's approach is irresponsible and won't work that seems like a not the worst idea for what they could do to differentiate themselves. Now, I understand some people are just going to hate them already, and people in the comments already just they hate the Liberals already and aren't ready to forgive them. Fine, maybe people will never forgive them. But if you were to play devil's advocate, I like doing this in lots of strange situations, right? You take a situation that seems hopeless and say, if you were in that position, what would you do? You can't just say, oh, I give up, or, I'd shoot myself or whatever. You can't do that. You have to genuinely try and find the least bad option. If people want to burn the place down and they're going to One Nation because of pox on all their houses, the Liberals to just say, oh, Labor's budget wasn't very good. All right, Labor's budget wasn't very good. I hate the uni party. I'll vote One Nation, right? But what is the difference? And then to say what they're going to do. Of course, I would love to see more parties say what they're going to do and give more details. But most people vote against, not for. Right, so most people are voting to vote for the Liberals. Most people vote against Labor. When they vote for Labor, what they're doing is voting against the Liberals. And now when they're voting for One Nation, they're voting against the uni party. And so if you're a Liberal, you've established, hopefully, their argument for why to vote against Labor. I think they need to, at some point, create the case for why vote against One Nation. And if they don't, why wouldn't a voter drift off towards One Nation? There's no case against them.
Yeah. Look, I mean, I'm not a political strategist, but I just think he's wasting time where he should be establishing himself as the alternative leader of Australia and putting forward policies related to what people are most concerned about. Isn't there that line from Churchill? I mean, it may have been misattributed, but the politician who wins, who's the most successful, is that politician who taps into what the majority of the population is most concerned about in the current moment. And in the current moment, it has to be the issues we've talked about. It's the fraying social fabric. It's the concerns about just the rapid population growth and lack of social cohesion, and then the risk of terrorism, domestic terrorism, particularly since Bondi.
Don't you think One Nation's tapped into both of those things in a more guttural way already?
They have.
So that's too late then. They can't. Their strategy can't be to do what someone else is already doing better than them. To the degree that people are thinking of if people walk into the voting booth thinking I want less immigration and that's my driving issue, no matter what is said between now and the next 2 years, they'll vote One Nation.
No, but I think but then it's a matter of showing you've got the better plan. And I think this is where you can argue on policy, but just coming out with a scare campaign and saying, well, One Nation is going to spend a ridiculous amount of money and we're going to have higher interest rates. I mean, maybe. But I think what would be better is if he had a well-developed plan. This is what we're going to do on immigration. This is how we're going to improve social cohesion. And just then argue, well, what's One Nation saying? What are they going to do specifically? Well, we've actually got some policies that are costed. This is what's going to be achieved. And we can deliver it because we've got, whatever experience we've got. We've got people who used to be in government. I mean, maybe that could backfire on them. I don't know. Look, I'm not a political strategist, but I just think...
Don't worry, we're part of the Uni Party. We've been here forever. We've been in swamp for a long time. Trust us, we're swamp creatures. Look, I would like parties to put out detailed policy. And from watching politics, my takeaway is the more details you give, the more excuses you give for people to be angry at your details. And so, which is why they're shy to do it. I also don't really trust their costings anyway, so it's all mostly tap dancing bullshit as far as I'm concerned on that front. Okay, you've got to give people a reason not to vote for the other guy, because everyone's going to say I have policies. Like if Angus Taylor was in the room right now, he'd be saying, I imagine something along the lines of, I do have policies. I've got a detailed policy for our immigration system. One Nation doesn't. But even though I've had that and I've been saying it for months, people aren't listening because they don't care about that when they vote. They vote on a vibe. And right now, there is no vibe reason to vote against One Nation. And look, it's the same. I make a similar defense of One Nation when people say, why don't they put out policies? They have. They've put out lots of policies. The Liberals have put out lots of policies. None of them make the 6 o'clock news or the front page of the paper because they're not very interesting. But Angus attacks Pauline personally, and we talk about it for the last 10 minutes. So I think there's something. Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure it'll work because I suspect one reaction to it will be exactly your reaction. Stop fighting One Nation. Go fight Labor. They're the real enemy. And if One Nation's smart, that's what they will say now. So I see a risk in what Angus Taylor's doing, but I see a massive risk in him doing nothing because if there's no reason for someone on the right not to jump on the One Nation train, then a lot of people are going to jump on the One Nation train. And I think the only thing that might give them pause is to think, oh shit, wait a second, maybe they can't run the economy properly. Maybe they'll send us bankrupt. That's a bit risky. I've got to get Labor out, but I don't want to send the country bankrupt. Now, I'm not sure that's a fair criticism. I'll add that. But as a tactic, I don't know. What do you think, dear listening public? I'd be keen and curious to know what you think about the accuracy of what Angus Taylor's saying, but perhaps more importantly in this context, the tactical wisdom. I guess we'll eventually tell by seeing the results. There's another issue. I didn't know how to do a segue on this one, so apologies to all the aficionados of segues. Speaking of, I know, if Angus Taylor doesn't do a good job, he will be out of a job. And speaking of labour markets, that was a terrible segue. Gene, you said there was some news in the labour market world. Apparently there's been a recent ruling.
The Fair Work Commission is foreshadowing that they're going to agree to 25% higher earnings for the food delivery drivers. So the Fair Work Commission's handed down a landmark draft decision proposing world-first minimum standards for on-demand food delivery, including a 25% pay rise and baseline rates of $31.30 to $32 an hour. And this compares with something, I think it was like $23 or something on average that they're earning now. So yeah, we're going to see an increase in the costs of delivery of the apps. And I mean, as you pointed out, I mean, maybe they can increase the charges, but then the other possibility is that it's increasing the cost of labor, and they're going to end up reducing the amount of hours that can be worked by these, or they'll limit the number of people who get onto the platform at any one time so that they can ensure that the people who are on earn this higher rate. And so that's going to reduce the opportunities for people to earn money in the gig economy. So look, I'm not a fan of the decision. It seems to be, these apps or these new employment opportunities were made available because of the fact that they could, in a way, get out of some of our employment regulations that are restrictive and cost jobs ultimately. So, I think that will be a very consequential decision. I think it could end up annoying a lot of consumers.
Well, undoubtedly, the most obvious consequence of this is that the cost of food deliveries will go up.
Yep.
So obviously someone's going to pay the price. And it's always assumed that whoever is the person you hate the most is the one that's going to pay whatever new tax or cost you impose. But of course, there is a way for that cost to be spread around, and it normally is spread around. Some is borne by the owner of capital, which is what everyone hopes. It's the owner of capital that'll get screwed, because we don't want people investing in capital, God forbid. But it's not always the owner of capital that gets screwed. It's sometimes it can be the customers. Actually, it often is the customers. A lot of costs get passed on through to the customer, and sometimes costs are borne by the worker in ways that are unexpected. Sometimes, and I'm not just talking here, I'm talking in general, right? Not just for the Uber Eats and what have you. But there are cases where, as you increase an employee's benefit in one area, they lose benefits in another area, right? They're given a harder work or more dangerous work, or they're taken away some other element or some other benefit they had. And of course, one obvious consequence is you put up the cost of Uber Eats. If then fewer people buy Uber Eats, then fewer delivery jobs will exist by definition, right?
Exactly.
So that's how behavioral responses work. And look, I think you really hit the nail on the head here. You mentioned the point about this whole little micro industry emerged as a workaround of previous overregulation. And it seems we're like in an arms race here, a battle. The regulators stifle the death out of something. An innovator comes along and finds a way around it. It then booms. It booms, right? I mean, this is the one thing we know. This is an industry. This is now a large industry, not because it was regulated well, but because they got away from the regulation. Then the regulators go, oh shit, something's out of my control. I guess I better get more control over it. They stamp their boot on it. It becomes very nice and regimented and very clean. A central planner can, put all of the different parts in their spreadsheet and make it look all very orderly and neat and tidy. But it's lost its innovative appeal. So I'm also skeptical of this. And I'm also just in general, the idea that the central planner sees something outside of their control and goes and brings it back in their tent. It is something I lament. So look, by the way, this also comes off the back of the recent announcements of increasing the minimum wage, which I believe was increased by 6%. I think it was about 6%, the minimum wage, which of course is going to be more than inflation and productivity. So that's going to create other similar issues. That's maybe not as big an issue because 6% is not as big as what was the implicit percentage you said there for Uber Eats? Like a 50% minimum wage increase.
About 25%. Yeah.
From 20 something up to 30 something. Anyway, that's going to be noticeable. So Aussie, the 4.75% one, that's for award wages. So that's for anyone who's got a sort of government contracted wage above the minimum wage, right? So we have a very convoluted, messy system in Australia where we don't just have one minimum wage. We've got a minimum wage baseline, and then depending on what industry you're in and which unions have got their secretary elected to the Labor Party Senate, et cetera, all of these backroom deals, you can get extra award minimum wages, and those went up by 4.75. The minimum went up by 6%. But one thing I wanted to note about that minimum wage increase, and this has been a bugbear of mine for a while, when people look at the minimum wage, they look at, understandably, the wage, right? The gross wage, the actual amount you get paid. If the real motivation here was the well-being of the worker, what you'd be interested in is what I call your net wage, or you'd want to know what is your net minimum wage change, right? The change in your well-being because of the change in the minimum wage. And they are not the same thing, right? Because you've got a gross wage change. What that's going to do for a lot of people is, firstly, you have to pay more tax on that extra, but also for a lot of these people receiving part welfare, and they're going to receive less welfare. And it's good for the government to pay less welfare. But from the context of that person receiving this wage change, you give them, say, $5, you give them $100 extra a week. They're not necessarily going to benefit $100 a week. Indeed, in this case here, there are some people who you give them this $100, if it was a $100 wage increase, they only benefit $33. Right? So I was working out before, depending on the situation you're in, but some families from this minimum wage increase will say that they'll think they're getting a 6% increase, they're only getting a 2% increase. Right? So I would encourage people to look through this gross minimum wage facade through to the net outcome. Once you look at the net minimum wage, once that is your goal, you'll notice there's two ways to achieve it. And this is the magic of this idea. I really like this. Someone said, Angus Taylor, Pauline Hanson, steal this idea. If once you're looking at the net minimum wage change, there's two ways to achieve it. One is to increase the gross minimum wage, which is already what they do. But you could also achieve the exact same outcome by just cutting taxes. Right? That would also achieve the same net minimum wage outcome, right? So you can now achieve this outcome two different ways. You can realize the truth of what they're doing, firstly, because transparency is always good. And then you can notice that there are better ways sometimes to achieve the same outcome.
But from the government's point of view, if you just think from their point of view, it's better if it comes from the employer, isn't it, rather than cutting the taxes? That's how they're looking at it.
Yeah. Absolutely. And that is their rationale. And I understand that. But
yeah, these greedy capitalists can pay for the higher wages. Yeah.
Well, that's the assumption that that's who ends up paying, right? Instead of it being passed on to consumer or lost jobs or worst working standards or the rest of it. Look, if they want to tax those greedy employers, then they could introduce a thing called a company tax. Oh wait, we've got one of those.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So the minimum wage is effectively just a very badly designed, badly targeted, inefficient, badly directed company tax. Right? It really can. You can recreate a minimum wage by just taxing businesses in certain really stupid ways, and then handing back that money as a welfare payment to the workers for that company. And if you designed it like that, it would be very clear how dumb that policy is. But if you hide that policy in the language of minimum wage, suddenly everyone thinks the exact same policies are a good idea.
Yeah. And we already have practically either the second or third highest minimum wage in the OECD, don't we, relative to median earnings? So we've already got a very high minimum wage, certainly relative.
I think it was just in absolute terms, in nominal amounts. I think it's the second highest in the world.
Yeah,
I believe so.
Yeah,
I mean, I haven't looked at that for 2 years, so that data could be.
It sounds right. I think I may have used that figure in one of my papers. Certainly in the ballpark.
Indeed. So, IR world. Another segue that I do not know how to manage, because this next topic is, again, got nothing to do with IR. I should have done that in a different order, because IR was a very economics heavy topic. And now I'm pivoting back into politics. We were talking before. I should have done this in a different order. I told you, everyone, this is live. When it's live, you see the mistakes as we make them. So jumping back on the old topic of Angus Taylor going after Pauline. Look, one issue there is, you were saying they need to say what they're going to do. Pauline's come out with a lot of things she's going to do. Angus is coming out with a lot of things he wants to do. Index tax brackets to get rid of bracket creep.
That's a good idea.
It is. It's one we've been pushing for a long time. I choose to believe he stole it from us. So, although the idea has been around forever. There is one fly in the ointment here. And this was the topic of the newsletter, the Australian Taxpayers Alliance newsletter this week, where lots of people from lots of political parties tell you what they want to do once they get elected. Their goal is to get elected. Once they are elected, of course, to actually do anything, you need to pass your legislation through the Senate. And here is the rub. So both One Nation and the Liberals are promising to do a hell of a lot of things. If they win government, they win the lower house. They'll be able to pass it through their legislation through the lower house. I think Liberals are promising to wind back Labor's tax changes. People are going to go to the next election thinking they're voting to wind back Labor's tax changes, or if they might be thinking they're voting for One Nation's policies on multiculturalism, or whatever the details are. And here's the thing. After the next election, regardless of who wins, Labor, Liberal, One Nation, or any coalition or combination of the above, the Greens will have balance of power in the Senate. I'll say that again. It's very likely that no matter who wins the next election, the Greens will have balance of power in the Senate, right? And I understand it gets a little dry, but I think it's important for people to have a clear understanding of this. It sounds like a black pill. It is a bit of a black pill. I'm not saying it to be demotivating or to discourage people. I'm saying it because I think accurate expectations are important to not get burnt out or to not misunderstand the situation we're in. If you think Australia needs a policy change, a change of direction, significant change of direction, as I do, this is not a one election project. This is at least a 2 election project, because the next federal election is likely still going to have Greens with the balance of power. So I'll explain the numbers in the Senate. Last election, Labor did very well, right? They did very well in the 2025 election, and those senators that got elected in 2025 are there for 2 elections' time, right? So come the 2028 election, all of the Labor senators that were elected in 2025 get to stay there, and there's 14 of them. Right, so 14 plus 2 extras from the territories, that's 16 that Labor's basically got locked in. All right, so that gives them an instant head start. If we look at the opinion polls right now and have a look at the senators that are up for election, so in 2028, how are those Senate races going to go? Based on current polls, it's pretty consistent. It's pretty, there's not too much ambiguity here. In nearly every state, there's going to be 2 Labor, 1 Green, 1 Liberal, and 2 One Nation. So that's great for One Nation. One Nation's really reforming the way the Senate's going to look. They're really shaking up how the Senate's going to look. But if you add all those numbers together and you add it to the existing number of senators that there are, that adds up to no party having a majority. The Labor won't have a majority. They will have, I think, 28. So they need 40 to pass legislation. The magic number is 40. Sorry, 39. Apologies. Take that back. Another proof of this being live. You need 39 to pass anything through the Senate. Labor will have 28. They're 11 short. Guess what? The Greens will have 12. Right? The Greens will have either 11 or 12. So Labor will rely on the Greens to get anything through. And based on the current numbers, even if the Liberals and Nationals and One Nation all got together, they would have, and they split the Senate spots, as I said before, they would have 34. So 34, that's more than Labor, great. But 34, you'll notice, is still 5 short. How are they going to pass anything? They can promise anything they want. They can promise the world and back. How are they going to pass anything with 34 senators when you need 39 votes? Spoiler, 34 is a smaller number than 39. They need 5 extra votes. They could try and get Labor on board. If their policy is to wind back Labor's policy, that's going to be hard. There is, on current polling, going to be only 2 independents in the Senate. They need 5 votes. So the only other option is the Greens. The Greens is very likely to have balance of power. Now, if there is a bigger swing against Labor, if there was a couple more percent swing, then you could change one more of those seats. One Nation, Liberal and Nationals combined would be up to 35 instead of 34. If they had a blinder, if there was like a 5% swing against Labor, it is theoretically possible that One Nation, Liberal and National combined, the best case scenario, realistic best case scenario, they could get up to 37. They need 39. The best case scenario is that David Pocock, a Teal, and Jackie Lambie, a crazy person, will have balance of power in the Senate. And again, what does One Nation or the Liberals think they would be able to pass with they'll get through the Senate if you relied on David Pocock and Jackie Lambie? And that's the best case scenario. That's if they have a blinder. So look, this is a bit of a black pill, and I apologize. I feel a little bit guilty to be the person to bring people such bad news. I'm not saying it to be cruel or to be discouraging. I don't want people to be discouraged. I want people to be aware that this is not a short-term fight. Be aware of what we're actually looking at here. We're looking at a 2-election project if you want to change the direction of Australia. And this is the consequence of doing so badly in the 2025 election, right? Because to dumb it down a little bit, each state, each election picks up 6 senators. So 6 senators in each state. And the norm is that they'll split 3 left-wing, 3 right-wing. So back in the day, it would be 3 from the Liberals and Nationals, 2 from Labor, 1 from Green. That would be like the normal split. Then the last election, One Nation started taking a few of the Liberal spots. But in 2 states last time, 2 states, there were 3 Labor and 1 Green. So it went 4 left-wing to 2 right-wing. And actually 3 states if you count Tasmania and Jackie Lambie, right? So if any state is giving a 4-2 result, 4 to the left, 2 to the right, that is an imbalance that is going to give them the majority in the Senate until at least the next time those senators are up for election. And in this instance, that's 2031. So yeah, I don't know what people want to do with that depressing news, that black pill. But it means there's going to have to be a lot more thought about what a government could do with regulatory power alone. And there are some things they can do. It is still worth changing governments to stop the governments doing the things you don't want them to do. But it's worth thinking about how we have to factor in this Greens control of the Senate for the next 5 years. Because wishing it away will not work. We have to deal with the reality we're giving. And no, I do not think a coup is a sensible response to this outcome.
I think that, yeah, I mean, I agree with you there. I think they can do a lot on immigration still, can't they? Just with the existing powers that they have without changing the law. I think they can make some significant changes. Yeah.
So there's some scope for regulatory changes, right? So they can change who's running some of the departments. So there are some things you can do with executive power that doesn't require legislative power. So anything that requires only executive power, then they can do that. So they can appoint the heads of departments. They have some control over immigration. They can appoint the head of the ABC and SBS and things like that. So there are some things they can do. But I think some of the promises being made, and then there's these big intricate debates of how do you cost this promise and what does it mean and how would you do it? To some degree, it's arguing about rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. I mean, it's a bit of a false argument. Unfortunately, Liberals go to the election saying they will wind back Labor's tax policies. They can only do that if either Labor or the Greens agree until 2031. So
So what would have to happen is if they can't get the numbers in the Senate, the loss to Labor would have to be so great that Labor and opposition has to change its policy, and that
Yeah.
that's possible. I mean, new oppositions have changed previous government the policies they had in government, so that's eminently possible. But yeah, generally I agree with your proposition that the Greens will have the balance of power, and that would limit whatever a one nation government would do.
Yes. No, you're right. There are still some things that that could be done, and people in the chat are mentioning some others that they might be able to get done. And I'm not saying this is a reason to try and go out and lose the next election. I'm just saying you have to run this through a filter. Anytime anyone's making a policy promise, you have to run it through the filter of, does this need to go through the Senate? Will it pass the Senate? Or maybe the question is, will it pass the Senate before 2031? Because, of course, there is a two-election victory strategy here where you win 2 in a row. And as someone's pointed out here, you can bring on that second election early. Double dissolution. You win the first election, the Senate blocks everything you're trying to do. You send the same thing back to the Senate 3 times and call a double dissolution and have an election again, spill all the seats. And that's worth considering.
John, as I've been saying, it's like the right-wing Whitlam government, right? I mean, Whitlam had a double dissolution election at 74. So, yeah.
That's also what Malcolm Turnbull did when he came in. When he took over from Abbott, he then he lined up a DD and had a DD election.
Yeah.
So there's a few questions coming in about this. I think you should check out, isn't half the Senate up like Thorpe and Babet? Yes, it's only half the Senate up for election. That's what I was saying. So all the people who won in Labor's big victory in 2025, most of those get to stay. Thorpe and Babet were both elected in 2022. So Lydia Thorpe was elected as a Green, and now she's like just a crazy communist independent. She will lose. If she runs again, she'll lose. Her spot will be taken back by the Greens. So that's not very interesting. Ralph Babet was elected for the UAP in 2022. As I understand it, he's always said he's not going to run again. And even if he does, I don't think UAP is going to win. So his spot will presumably be taken up by a One Nation person in Victoria. One Nation's likely to win 2 in every state. And yeah, so those 2 will be gone. The other one, Fatima Payman, was elected for Labor. She was also elected in 2022. She quit Labor and is an independent. She was, I think her party's called Australia Voice. She's the Muslim lady from Afghanistan who keeps, I think Pauline Hanson keeps saying that she's still an Afghani citizen, so she should be kicked out of parliament. I think that's the one. Although she actually voted quite well, Fatima Payman, against some of the government's censorship programs. So God bless her for that. She redeemed herself a bit in that one. But all of those will be gone after this election, and you'll just be left with probably Liberal, Labor, Green, One Nation, and the 2 independents.
What was the rationale for that? Was she worried that the censorship could end up being applied to people like her, or to people who are allied to causes that she supported? I mean, I think it's the right move. I agree. I don't believe in censorship either. I'm just wondering.
Yeah, I mean, her rhetoric on it was just that she didn't trust the government with this sort of power, which I agree with. There is a subtext of this opinion from some minority groups. So the sort of people who like to protest against the police worry about the police's ability to crack down and put away protesters. So probably the fact that she's a Muslim and got a support base from Muslims might have had something to do with it. But for better or worse, whatever her reason, I think she came down on the right side of that issue.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I wasn't aware of that. That's good.
No, one of her votes helped to block one piece of hate speech legislation at some point. I think because they're worried that if Muslims complain about Israel, they might get pinged for hate speech. I think that's part of one part of the logic. So you're not as worried about the state of the Senate, I take it, or?
Well, I mean, honestly, no. I think whatever happens, we just got to try and make the best of it. I think, yeah. I mean, I'm not entirely sure how things will work out if One Nation get into power. We're just going to try try and do our best. Yes, I mean, I'd like to see the current government adopt more rational policies, but I'm not sure they will. So yeah, I think we will end up seeing a change of government of some kind. I mean, it could end up, the Senate may actually provide some irrational, like it does provide some check on excesses of power or wild swings in policy. So it can be good in that regard. The issue is, I suppose it depends on who is the balance of power. It may be better. It probably would be better if it was Pocock and who was the other person you mentioned? Was it
Jackie
Lambie? Was it
from Tasmania? Yeah.
Well, that'd probably be more sensible than the Greens. You would probably end up with better outcomes. So yeah, I mean, I'm not freaking out about what you've said by any means.
Yeah, look, I've got to say that this screed that I just gave then was not me pitching to abolish the Senate or have a unicameral system. There is certainly a benefit in having the Senate around to sometimes slow down a government.
Yeah,
there can be a virtue of that, right? I mean, Albanese wasn't able to get away with as much during his first term because he didn't have as much control of the Senate. And the Senate moves slower in how it changes composition than the House. So the House can flip in an election. It could go strongly Liberal to strongly Labor at the next election. But because there's this lock-in of half of the senators, it basically requires you to have 2 good victories in a row before you can get as much done. And there's a virtue to that, right? There's a degree of forcing the politicians to slow down and make the case for something and keep that case up for a few years. So none of this is a complaint about the Senate system as such. I could go into quibbles, but I won't now because that's not the point. My point here is just to make people aware. I think what I really think, I didn't write this in the newsletter, but what worries me is people get disillusioned from politics. I think a lot of people are disillusioned. They've gone Liberal to Labor to Liberal to Labor. Now they think they all suck, burn them all down. The whole system doesn't work. They didn't want to vote. And then if they go, oh, look, this one nation revolution is happening, I'll hop on board that. And they get excited. Just like people jumped on the Trump train who were totally disaffected and disengaged from politics. And then they got engaged. And like people who might be inspired by Farage or Rupert Lowe, they get engaged. And imagine the situation, these people, this disillusioned, probably not overeducated, probably not that wealthy, and they get excited about politics. They go along to some marches or protests or what have you, and then they win. And then they win. And then they're told at that time, and that's when they find out, you can't do anything. Yeah, that could create anger. I mean, that could create this is a majority of people who just voted for something and who have been what they would probably see as being misled and stymied by institutions and organizations that were corrupt, as I imagine they would see it. So I think it's important to go into these things with our eyes wide open, to have realistic expectations. Not to discourage people, but to get them to be in it for the long term, join the fight for the long term.
So I think what you're saying is that there's a more significant, this is increasing the risk of social, a lack of harmony after the next election. It's increased. I'm just trying to think how would that affect, the economy?
Well, it's not the economy, lack of faith in the institutions, right? I mean, there is, look, a lot of these institutions we have now don't deserve the faith that the people in power say that you should have, right? There's a lot of people lamenting lack of faith in institutions. There's a solution: stop being assholes, right? Act better, and then we can have more faith in institutions. But to some degree,
politicians,
they're not.
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of the banking institutions, media institutions, just every sort of all of the things that are the normal part of how society has lived forever, and part of it functions on trust. Right, social capital in the language of economics, applying the language of economics to sociology. Social capital is a hugely important part of our system, but it's like oxygen. You don't really notice it's there. You only really notice it when it's gone. Right, if you run out of oxygen and you suddenly realize you needed it. You run out of social capital, you're going to realize you needed it. Right, and part of that is this degree of trust in institutions that allows those institutions to keep working without massive enforcement and compliance and administrative costs. And that is one of the virtues of the Western world, that we had these relatively efficient institutions that were trusted. And some of them have lost trust for a good reason, right? I think people are within their rights to be distrustful of the modern bureaucracy, the modern media, the modern education institutions. I think these have all been corrupted and co-opted to some degree. But can you imagine the amount of faith being lost in the political process if you suddenly got re-engaged for the first time in forever and you were engaged in the front line of a campaign and you won, you legitimately won, only to find out the next day that you're not allowed to do anything for 3 years? I reckon some people might not be trusting those institutions. And in a democracy, in a functioning democracy, you want people to believe in functioning democracy. You want them to believe in it more than I do anyway.
Well, that would increase their vote at the next election. I think if that were the case, then they would get a big political benefit from it.
And no, they're disengaged. I mean, if you suddenly found out the whole thing was corrupt, you would just burn it to the ground. Why would you go and vote again? Your voting did nothing last time. They're not necessarily just going to suddenly do a deep dive in the intricacies of Senate proportional representation and terms, right? They're going to feel like they have been robbed by someone who is corrupt. The conspiracy theories will run rampant. You could imagine there being not entirely peaceful, fiery, but mostly peaceful protests.
Look, possibly. I mean, you're thinking there'd be another. I know where you're going, but I mean, an alternative is that One Nation, if they get into government, they do a few things with immigration that they can do within the existing law. And I've no doubt they can crack down on that and reduce numbers within the existing law, and they'll get a win out of that. And then they say, well, these troublesome or these Greens, they're causing all this trouble in the Senate, and we'll just have a double dissolution as quick as we can. I think they'd have a honeymoon. They'd have momentum. I think they can sustain themselves to the next election and maintain that support. Like, how quickly can you get a double dissolution up? You can get it up within a year and a half, can't you?
Yeah, within a year, I reckon. No, you're right. Look, I'm not saying I think this will happen. I'm saying this is the reason. This is one of the reasons I try to give people realistic expectations. If people are aware of the difficulties they need to overcome, then they're not suddenly shocked and surprised and angry when it doesn't happen. People who walk into situations with unrealistic expectations get very easily depressed or jaded or angry. And what we want is for people to be in the fight long term and stay in the fight. So I'm just trying to give realistic expectations. That's kind of my point.
You seem to be you're seeing the glasses half empty, aren't you? Or half. Is that the right way to look at it? Yeah, it's a glass half empty, is the way you're looking at it. So is that your natural disposition, just to try and see what we're lacking or what the sort of downside is?
I'll give you a story to paint the picture from this approach. Okay. You may know many years ago, when I was a much younger man and had less grey hair, I started a political party.
Yes.
So back this was 2001. It was called the Liberal Democrats back then. It's called the Libertarian Party now. There were a bunch of other people around the same time in Canberra. I lived in Canberra at the time. Where I was working for the government, of all things, starting a Libertarian Party. I was working for Treasury. And there were a few other people around Canberra who also were starting political parties. And because we were all new and starting political parties, we all kind of got to know each other. When we went into that first election, the other people that had started this sort of two-bit party and I Like Kittens party or whatever it was, not their real names, I was asking them their expectations, and they were saying, "Oh, we're going to get 10%. I'm going to win 3 spots. I'm going to get 12%. I might get 40%. I'm going to win my seat." And they were saying that to all their supporters. They were saying that to all their members and all their candidates. And I said to our members, our supporters and candidates, "Look, I think we'll get about 1 or 2%. We're not going to win." Now, very black pill, very depressing, very glasses half empty. Our party got about 1% in that first election. Most of those other parties got less than 1%. The people at my party stuck around, right? We got what we expected. We correctly predicted it. We understood we were in this for the long term. We built. Next election, we got slightly more. Next election, we got slightly more. And it kept going, right? These other ones, they thought they were going to get 10, 20%, and they got 0.7. Do you think they wake up the next day and go, I want to keep busting a gut and working really hard for 3 years to keep helping? They just gave up. None of those parties exist anymore. And you can understand why, right? Their expectations were totally out of kilter. They were smacked in the face with reality, and that just knocked them out of the game. With realistic expectations, you can keep moving forward and driving forward. So I just wanted to, I think there is a value in realistic expectations in keeping people in the game. So,
well, I think what's valuable in what you've said, I think it's an important point I hadn't thought of, but it means that the people in One Nation, they have to start strategizing and thinking about, well, how will we realistically deal with this? And I mean, I imagine Ashby's thinking about this. I mean, he seems very Machiavellian. He just seems to be very.
It's a different sort of
cunning.
It's a different sort of Machiavelli. I don't, and this isn't just a question for One Nation. It's Liberals if they get back in as well. It's whoever gets in out of Liberal and One Nation. They have to ask themselves, what can we do that's useful without control of the Senate? And look, I believe there are some people out there thinking about this. Probably not enough people, but we also need to make sure that the public's aware that without a DD. To start with, it's not going to be many big things getting through the Senate. And that's fine. Look, if that's what happens and everyone understands it and expects it, then it's not a big deal. So that's my role, is to increase the awareness so that it becomes slightly more expected, so that it's not a big deal. Anyway, we've hit 1 hour 20. I was going to try and make this one a bit shorter. So I'm happy to take any more comments or topics if you want. Otherwise, should we go to a few of the...
Well, just finally, should we comment on, I mean, what's happening in Britain? We've got Farage resigning to contest the by-election against Count Binface. Just extraordinary. I mean,
so the context here is, I believe Farage was getting in a bit of trouble for not reporting his donations correctly or something like that. I didn't follow the details of the scandal that closely. So as a bit of a political stunt, he said, all right, well, that's it. I'm quitting my seat and I'm rerunning. So there's a by-election. I'll be in the by-election. And the idea was clearly because Farage's party, the One Nation of the UK, called Reform UK, is winning in the polls. Right? They're doing very well. They're clearly ahead of the UK Labour Party and the UK Conservative Party. And so he wants to put up a by-election. And he was hoping that Labour and the Tories, the Conservatives, would go against him, and he gets to beat them, and that gives him momentum, and he can. So that was you might say, a politically smart tactic. It kind of backfired, because as soon as he announced that he was stepping aside and rerunning in the by-election to replace himself, Labour said they're not going to run. The Conservatives said they're not going to run. The Liberal Democrats said they're not going to run. The Greens said they're not going to run. Restore UK said they're not going to run. And then a guy called Count Binface, who runs around with a cape and a giant painted bin over his head, he said he is going to run. So now this political stunt has turned into Nigel Farage versus Count Binface in the race for Clacton by the Sea, or whatever his electorate's called. So
but it's fascinating, the UK situation, because you've got Rupert Lowe now, and Karl Stefanovic just interviewed him, and there are people on the right in the UK who think that Farage he's too soft, or he's not going to achieve what they want. He's actually supportive of multiculturalism, among other things. So it's rather interesting, how you say, he is leading in the polls, but then he's under attack from the right. There's this, it's quite extraordinary.
Well, that's the Restore UK party, which is very interesting over there. And Rupert Lowe runs that. He was also on Joe Rogan, I think, this week. So he's doing the rounds. It'll be interesting to see if he's able to make an impact. He came third in the last by-election. The by-election that brought into power the new UK Labour leader and coming Prime Minister. So Labour won that by-election. Reform came second. Rupert Lowe's Restore, the second right-wing party, came in third. So, but Reform is still clearly winning in the polls, right? At the moment, Restore is on 3 to 5%. That's the insurgent parties on 3 to 5. And Reform is still close to 30% in the One Nation territory.
Right.
Gotcha. What I find interesting there is you've got this split on the right happening in a few places, right? You've got Trump, and then Trump's MAGA is splitting in two. Then you've got Farage's Reform, And as he gets to the pinnacle of political power, there's a split. And I wonder, since Australia tends to be 5 or 10 years behind these trends, is this a premonition for the future of the Australian right wing? And I've said before, I think there is a chance that One Nation rises and then One Nation may start declining again. It's not saying it's anything I want to happen. It's just I think it's quite a viable future path that One Nation starts coming down again, but people don't go back to the Liberals. And then they're sort of stuck looking around for something. I need something else. And I think it's an interesting possibility, an interesting niche that, of course, Clive would try to fill, but I don't think anyone trusts Clive anymore.
Yeah,
I think the person perhaps best positioned to fill that niche, if it happened in Australia at the moment, would be Gerard Rennick. But we're probably still 5 years away from that because Australia is still 5 years away from all these trends. But yeah, it's the restore. The rise of Rupert Lowe is interesting in the UK context.
Gerard's, I mean, he has a lot of supporters among people who follow politics closely. I just wonder how much visibility he has beyond that. I mean, really, I think probably Canavan and Joyce are probably the most likely candidates to lead a new party or a unified. Well, I mean, they're both. Well, Matt's in Nationals and Joyce is in One Nation, but I think that they're going to have to unite in some way, or there'll have to be a breakaway from the Nats and Libs, and then maybe a breakaway from One Nation to form something new. I don't know what it's going to look like, but yeah, I agree. I don't think they're going to go back to the Liberals or Nationals.
Yeah, although if you look at what's happening in the UK and US, it's often people coming from outside the establishment. I mean, we're still looking inside the establishment.
True.
With those names.
True.
And look, as we've discussed before, I think Matt Canavan's probably the best politician floating around Australia at the moment, in federal politics anyway. But it may be that we need people from outside, the bomb throwers from outside, to come in and be the dark horse of the race. And I don't think it's clear who it is yet. I think Gerard Rennick's a bright guy. I'm not convinced it's going to be him either. I'm just saying that I can't see anyone else who fits the role better than he currently does. If he got together with Mark Latham, Ralph Babette, John Ruddock, Craig Kelly, there you go. They could be an interesting. But a lot of these people were still political types. Maybe we need a true outsider. His name, Kogan, the guy who set up Kogan.com.
Ruslan Kogan,
He could run,
yeah.
Maybe it's you, Gene. There you go. You could dark horse for Australia.
I think you're the charismatic libertarian economist. But
we don't have. Who is it? ATA party. Who's it? We normally have one of the commentators in here insisting that I grow my sideburns for the Harvey and Malay. the crazy economist vote. All right, let's run through a few of these questions quickly and then try to have a more early night than usual. I'm going to go work my way backwards from this. Could do a Germany and have 3 to 5 parties in government? Look, it could be. If the right wins the next election, it would either have to be guaranteed supply or some sort of coalition between Liberal and One Nation. And look, the National Party probably won't exist in a year or two. On current polling, the National Party will be down to 1 senator and I think 1 person in the House.
Yeah.
Right. So that senator isn't even Matt Canavan. So I hope Matt wins, but on current polling, he's struggling to pick up that Senate spot again. So I don't know if we still count them as a party, but it could be a Liberal National One Nation government. The thing about Germany and a lot of those European countries you have to understand is they have prop rep for their lower house. Right? It's unicameral, but it's proportional representation. If you get in Germany, the rules are if you get over 5%, then you're going to get some seats. And so what they have is a lot of parties that are getting 7 and 8 and 10 and 11%, and no one ever gets enough to get a majority, right? That's pretty much unheard of. So there's always a coalition of some sort. And then they've got their Christian Democrats, sometimes in a coalition with their Free Democrats, and they've got the Social Democrats, sometimes in a coalition with the Greens. And then they've got their right-wing party called AfD, Alternative for Deutschland. And when AFD does well, the Christian Democrats and the Social Democrats and a coalition with the Greens and the Free Democrats, and they're always forming these different coalitions, but they kind of have to because of the nature of their political system, right? No one ever gets majority because it's all prop rep. Like I follow the Dutch. My wife suffers from being Dutch, so I follow Dutch politics a bit, and they have the same thing, right? So it's always 2 or 3 or 4 parties in a coalition. We've got not a first past the post. We've got a system of 1 person per electorate in our lower house, which means we tend to not have that same sort of amalgam. There was a question I wanted to. Oh yes. After a DD, how do they figure which senators stay or go at the next election? It's the order in which they're elected. So in a DD, you elect 12 senators from each state. So in our home state, Jean and my home state of Queensland, 12 people will be elected. But when they're electing them, they don't just say these are the 12. They run through and they list what order they were elected in. And the first 6 people elected are elected for 2 terms, and the next 6 people elected are elected for the shorter term. So that's the way they work out who is up for election. There was another one here. Didn't Gillard get a load of changes in when she was minority government? Well, yes, she was minority government in the lower house as well. The thing is, she was ruling a left-wing government with support from left-wing independents, right? So she didn't have a majority, but she had a working coalition, right? Kind of like how Labor and the Greens have a working coalition in the Senate, right? It's not Labor doesn't have the majority, but they're dealing with a left-wing party. So anytime Labor wants to increase tax, they don't have the numbers in the Senate, but they can rely on a left-wing party in the Senate to always vote for a tax increase. So Gillard didn't have the numbers in either the lower house or the Senate, but she could rely pretty consistently on left-wing bias or sensibilities perspective from the people who had balance of power. So yes, she had a minority government, but she was supported by fellow lefties in her minority government. Whereas if the Liberals in One Nation get into government in the next election, they will rely on support from the Greens, which you can see how that's a very different thing. That would be like if Julia Gillard had to rely on support from One Nation, she would not have got much through, right? Yeah. And likewise, Liberals or One Nation need to rely on support from the Greens to get legislation passed. They aren't going to get as much through. What else have we got here? One Nation Party to set up omnibus of changes and then say the Greens oppose tax deductions. Well, firstly, the Greens do oppose tax deductions. They just say that out and out, right? They just say they want higher taxes. They don't try to keep it a secret. And God bless them for that. I mean, they're doing the thing that's more honesty in politics than you get from the major parties. They've got an ideological commitment to some version of socialism, whether it's hard red or light green socialism. And they just say, look, we need more taxes. You all pay more, and then I'll give you more free handouts, right? They are clear about that. Just like on the other side, the Libertarian Party is clear. They just say, look, we will take away your handouts. We will give you less stuff. You'll get less stuff for free, but we will cut your taxes. Both of those positions are intellectually coherent, intellectually honest, and not particularly popular, which is why the major parties tend to not be quite as blunt about their positions. But yes, omnibus bill, well, you do that for the double dissolution, right? So if you have something you have a bunch of things you really want to do, put them in an omnibus bill, get them voted down 3 times, because after a double dissolution, here's the thing, after a double dissolution, you probably still won't control the Senate, right? But after a double dissolution election, the House meets once where the House and the Senate meets together. And they do that to pass that one bill. The one bill you couldn't pass previously, that bill is taken to a joint sitting of the House and the Senate combined. So everything you really want that you're going to struggle to get through the Senate, you put in that omnibus bill, you have your DD election. After the election, combined sitting of the House numbers are normally stronger than the Senate numbers, then you should be able to put it through that combined sitting. And then you'll go back to having to deal with the raucous Senate. Did you got...
there was one that's come in. Yeah, that was the one I wanted to show.
Did you follow the? I'm not in the LNP, so I don't get all the updates. My understanding is that maybe we'll have to ask Graham. But if anyone knows that's listening in,
Oh, I know what happened. It didn't go ahead.
Yeah, I thought they withdrew it. I thought they withdrew at least one of the motions. Do you know why?
Yeah. I don't know. Obviously, I've got no idea. Maybe they were convinced that if they had the fight would backfire on them. It wouldn't be a good look to be. I don't know. Look, honestly, I don't know. I'm not a member either. So, but yeah, I just saw that it didn't go ahead. So it certainly was a bust.
It might have been when we did that ideological Turing test last week, if you remember that. Maybe we did it too effectively.
Maybe.
We convinced him.
Yeah, maybe. Yes. So.
Yes, suffers from being Dutch. I try to be as rude as possible. I have to tone it down a little bit when everyone's listening, but there's much worse versions of that joke.
We have a lot to be thankful to the Dutch for. I mean, the Indonesians didn't like the Dutch, but I think the Dutch did make major contributions to Western civilization and to capitalism, to finance, particularly. I think they created the bond, didn't they? If you look as a financing instrument, like some of the oldest examples of bonds are for financing water mills or water schemes in Holland back in the day.
You sure it wasn't for financing tulip speculation? Because they also gave us that.
I guess it was a part of that too.
Craze.
Yeah, they gave us that too. Yeah.
The Dutch are the most culturally English of all the non-English speaking people. The language is also the closest to English of all the non-English speaking people. Actually, Flemish is, but Flemish is just pretty sounding Dutch.
Oh yeah, and there was a Dutch takeover of Britain in the 1690s, wasn't there?
And there was after the Spanish and Portuguese sort of discovered the world, the two great naval powers that replaced them were first the Dutch and then the British. And for a while, they were competing to see who's going to be the great naval power of the world. And the Dutch were in the lead to start with. And then steadily the British slapped them around and took over and created the largest empire the world's ever seen. But for a while, it was a Dutch-British race for that. And before New York was New York, it was New Amsterdam, taken by the English off the Dutch in one of those battles. One of the Anglo-Dutch wars. But anyway, we're getting into well off track. This is a history and economics podcast. A economics and politics podcast, and maybe we need to add history.
Well, I just wanted to speak up for the Dutch because they made major contributions to both Western civilization and in particular the development of capitalism and finance. So full credit.
They always punched above their weight for the number of people they had in history. So I pick on them because I love them, which is the Australian way of doing things. So to get around needing a DD. Okay, you already see that one. This is going back to the Uber Eats. Food delivery drivers can either accept or decline each order. What if they just decline each order? Do they still get $32 an hour for doing nothing? It's got to be some sort of average system. There'd be a regulation around that. But,
and that's why I think they're going to limit the number of people who can hop onto the platform at any time. So they'll throttle the numbers who can get onto the platform so there's enough work so that the people who are on it will be earning that amount.
I'd be surprised if they do it though. I would have thought they just add in a bigger delivery cost and then pass on the benefit of that delivery cost to the drivers. And then that way the drivers will get the extra money they need to pass their KPIs. But what that'll do, of course, is some people will stop ordering as much food.
Well, they could do a combination of those two things. But what I've heard that I've seen, that's one hypothesis. And I've also seen that what I was saying, that's been kicked around as a possible response. And I think that may be what's happened in another jurisdiction. Anyway, I'm not. Anyway, I'll look more into it. Yep, I'll have a think about it.
What is this one? Socialism results in communism, the political class owning all the wealth, not the rich in private sector. Not sure what the end of that means. By the way, not that people care that much because they're used as synonyms, but technically socialism is the government owns everything. And communism is the government owns everything and belts people around so much that they become perfect people where people only ever share and are benevolent to each other. And then the government just disappears and there is no government. So they are not quite the same thing, but every communist country never actually got around to the government disappearing part. The government just got ever bigger and stronger, and they never even thought about disappearing, because they were only supposed to disappear once they fix people, and you're never going to, quote unquote, fix people. So communism is basically a bit of a idiotic idea at its end state. So it all ends up just being socialism of various degrees. But yeah, all right. Did you see any other stars you wanted to bring up here? Lyndon asked a question: house prices down but rents up. You want to take that?
Well, I mean, they're different markets, aren't they? I mean, they're related markets, but I mean, what's been happening is that, I mean, the house prices were bid up partly by, there's all of this excess, all of this credit, lots of credit growth, lots of investors getting into the market. There was a lot of exuberance, so the prices were being driven up, and now we've got a correction to something more, more rational levels. So, I mean, I think those house prices overshot in the rental market. That's been driven by supply and demand of rental properties, and one of the problems there is, I mean, we just don't have enough rental properties. We're not building enough new supply, and we've still got lots of people coming into the country, lots of foreign students. So the forces in that market are pushing up the rents, and now we've got the changes to property investment tax settings, and the changes to negative gearing and capital gains tax. There, what has to happen is, if the market has to rebalance so that effectively the cost of renting versus owner occupation is similar, that's what has to happen in the long run. Then you have to have the case that one way the market rebalances is that the house prices fall, and another way is that the rents rise, so that the yield on the investment property actually is restored. So the problem with when the government makes this change to negative gearing and capital gains tax, they're reducing the after-tax yield on the investment properties, and so that has to be restored in some way, and that'll either be through prices falling or rents rising. So that's another way I look at it.
Absolutely. Like, a simple way of thinking of it is that they are different markets, and every time, if you change taxes or indeed change interest rates in a way that makes people less or more likely to buy an investment property, right? If more people want to buy investment properties, that bids the price of houses up, but then there's more supply of rental properties, so putting downward pressure on rents. If fewer people want to buy investment properties, there's fewer people buying the properties, there's less demand for buying the property, but that means there is less supply of rental properties, right? So they're not unrelated markets, and you said there very nicely, there's a ratio between the two. I'd say the right way of thinking of it was explained very eloquently, I think, by Cam Murray, when he points out that work out the rental price first, and then the house price is going to be a risk-adjusted present value of the future flows of that rental income, right? So that is what would make it an intelligent investment decision, right? You have to then add on the fact that some people just really, really love a certain house, and that's going to change things. But averaging that out over the long run, that's the risk-adjusted present value of those rental flows. And then what we've done now is sort of adjusted these tax changes, or interest rate changes for that matter, change the way you do that risk-adjusted present value calculation.
Yeah.
But it doesn't actually change anything about the underlying supply and demand for rental properties. So the underlying issue is still that there's too many people trying to get into not enough houses, and that'll keep showing up as high rents. But tax and interest rate changes can do things to the house prices separately from that. That's a good question.
Yeah.
That's an obvious question to ask, but I think this one's for you as well then. AI issue, or Taiwan. When AI implodes, all the GPUs will be next to useless. They can't even be used in the gaming sphere since they don't have the video logic. I know nothing about such things.
Oh, look, I think there will definitely be demand for them. I think we've got the demand for AI is clearly there in terms of the uses, like with Claude and ChatGPT, etc. So I've got no doubt that those GPUs will be used, and they'll fill up all these data centers. But what we'll have is that we'll build a whole bunch at once, and then we'll have overcapacity, and they won't need to build as many for several years after that. So what could happen is that we've got this investment boom right now, but we'll overbuild and then we'll have a investment crash. That's a possibility.
Yeah, we talked about that before. The actual economic value of the boom bust cycle. It's often seen as an unadulterated negative, and it probably is a negative in total. But there is a silver lining, and that is it can create this overcapacity, which then creates this extra resource or a piece of infrastructure that is then for sale or rentable at a very low price, artificially low, and it's lower than it would be if everyone was sane during the old bubble. And then that creates all these incentives to go and make use of this very cheap input into the process, and then you get other outcomes from it. But yes, I think I didn't know that about the GPUs not being usable in other spheres, but I think you're right. They'll just use it for AI in other ways.
Well, I think we're clearly going to need all of these data centers because we're finding new things to do with AI all the time. The models keep advancing. So yeah, I've got no doubt we'll find uses for them.
Lyndon here, more of a comment than a question. On one side, it's called the Arabian Gulf. The other side, it's called the Persian Gulf. You just got to know which side of the Gulf you are. This goes back to our discussion, I think, of the war. Don't mention the war. I mentioned it once, but I think I got away with it. That's I think a Monty Python reference there for.
Oh, it was Fawlty Towers.
No one's going to get that. Fawlty Towers, yes,
you're right. Yeah, don't mention the war because he had German staying in the in the hotel. He starts. I better not do that. It wasn't on screen. It wasn't on screen. But yeah, he starts.
You were just hailing a taxi, right? That was, just asking for the bill.
You couldn't make that show nowadays.
No, there's a lot of things you couldn't make these days. Back onto housing, Labor and its 5% deposit, waiting to come home to roost with massive negative. Look, some people are going into negative equity already. It's only going to really impact them if they try to refinance or sell or buy a house now. But some people will be doing that. That's going to be tricky. There is this catch-22 at the heart of the housing issue, that housing is too expensive, but not enough people have thought through the consequences of a housing crash, right? They've thought through, oh, good, I'll have cheap housing. It's going to be more than just cheap housing. It's going to be people defaulting, people going bankrupt. It can get messy. And that's why a lot of people end up coming down on the side of, let's just have a nice easing of the prices, or maybe a plateau so they go down in real terms. That might be the goal. It's very hard to perfectly plan an economy, as everyone who's ever tried to has discovered.
Yeah.
But yes, there's risks on both sides. I think this is your point, is it? Taylor's the opposition, so he should be making most of knocking down Labor to keep the public interest. So knocking one nation is a wasted resource. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't understand it. I think he's missing the opportunity to develop a compelling case against what the government's doing, or to give a speech that can excite people, say something interesting, or just try and motivate.
He gives a lot of speeches. So I think you underestimate the number of speeches and policies that parties put out and no one ever hears.
Okay.
And then when they finally say something, people go, why didn't you say this and that? And I said, I've been saying it for 3 years, every day. This is the speech that everyone wants to report on. That's the difference.
Yeah, that could be it.
Look, I think your point is good, and I think it'll probably play the way you're saying, but there's a Aussie, so RW is agreeing with you. I think Aussie is making a counterpoint. We say the enemy is Labor, but one nation is the one that will wipe the libs out. They have to convince voters, the voter libs, over one nation, whether they're doing a good job or bad job. If you don't convince them why libs are better than one nation.
Yeah.
And realistically, everyone sort of says, give us your vision of the future. Voters vote against more than they vote for. They really do, right? Very few people in Australia go into a voting booth and think, I'm voting passionately for the Liberals or for Labor. They walk in and they're saying, I'm voting passionately against Labor or against the Liberals. Right? They go in with a baseball bat and they beat the guy they don't like the most by voting for the other one. Most people vote against. So in this instance, One Nation is pitching vote against both the majors because they're the uni party. Makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Labor's saying vote against both the Liberals and One Nation because they're both right wing. Makes sense. And Liberals are saying vote against Labor because they've run the country into the ground. And I won't mention One Nation and just hope that no one notices them. Now, when people hadn't noticed One Nation, that was the right tactic. Just don't talk about them. Hope they don't notice them. That horse is bolted. I think people have noticed One Nation.
Yeah, I just wonder
Aussie goes
if
on to
people...
say...
Anyway, we've had that discussion before. Yeah, go ahead, Aussie.
As I said, the conclusion of Aussie's point here, a poor One Nation in government could backfire and push the middle back to Labor as a worst-case outcome. Or push them towards future Prime Minister Jean Tunney or future Prime Minister RW or Aussie or whoever's listening into this. Gerard Rennick.
John
Ruddock.
Humphreys. Yeah.
So you can finish your point. I didn't mean to interrupt you there.
I was just, I mean, I'm just trying to think where I was going with that. Well, if they're in the voting booth, so why would they then, if they're looking at, oh, okay, we don't like the government, so we'll vote for someone else, and then you're hoping that they'll, or not hoping, but you're thinking that what they'll do or Angus Taylor's hoping they'll go, oh, One Nation, we're not sure about them. Oh, let's go to, let's vote Liberal. The issue is that I think the problem he's got is that the Liberals have been in government. One Nation's never been in government. So people have experience of what things were like in government, and they're not when the Liberals were in government, and they weren't happy with them either. So I just can't see how his tactic is going to help. That's. But
I mean, that's why they're screwed. Well, that's why they're screwed always round. So anything he says, like this is my policy. Yeah, you told me what your policies were last time, and we elected you. So that's not different, right? So that is you have eloquently described there the problem they face. Now they've got to get those voters to walk into the polling booth, and just before they tick One Nation, you have to create in them this instinctive guttural feeling of, oh shit, that's too scary. Yes. I mean, that's what they need to be striving for. I don't know if it's doable. And I don't mean to be giving free advice because I'm not sure it's what I want to happen. I mean, I've got no horse in this race. I'm just commenting on the tactics of the politics. But I mean, that's what I would have thought their tactic had to be, is to get people wanting to vote to change the government, but finding One Nation too scary an option. And so what is the safe way you change government? You vote for that boring safe guy.
Yeah.
I don't know if it'll work, but...
I'm pretty sure it won't. Yeah. I think we'll have Andrew Hastie in as leader before long.
He doesn't.
Yeah.
I don't know if Andrew Hastie's going to change much. So this is just Aussie finishing that point. So look, it may be that they switch to Hastie. I'm not sure. I'm not sure he'll want to inherit that poison chalice, but I'm not sure that'll change anything.
No, probably won't.
Maybe if they'd switched to him a year ago when he was still younger and still had more of that star factor. But at this point, like so many slow-moving organizations, they're doing it a year late after the moment has already gone.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't know what this is yet, but Bezos flying delivery drones looking to be feasible. Oh yes, delivery drones. It won't need the drivers.
Yeah.
All right. The devil you know, or the drevel you know. Yeah, I prefer the drevel. And didn't Hastie vote for the hate speech laws? I think he did in the end. He voted for the hate laws. Right. So that's one of the reasons people got grumpy at him, is he said he would never vote for Labor's hate laws. And then there was some changes made, and then he voted for the hate laws. And I guess he says that it's okay because there were changes made. I still think he made a mistake in that. But look, you never find a politician you agree with on everything. If you throw someone out of your political consideration because of one disagreement, then you're going to run out of people to support very quickly.
Yeah,
I think Ronald Reagan said, if you agree with me 20% of the time, don't vote for me. If you agree with me 80% of the time, vote for me. If you agree with me 100% of the time, go get your head read. No one agrees with someone 100% of the time, right? That makes no sense. So
he was good. He was the great communicator.
He was indeed. Anyway, I think we'll wrap that up before we hit the 2-hour mark. So a nice early mark for us, Gene. As I ask you at the end of every one of our chats, anything from this chat that struck your fancy or want to take away from this conversation?
I'm thinking more about just I'm going to be thinking about is Angus Taylor going to actually try and get, win back support, and I'm going to be thinking about that a bit more and what he should be doing in terms of developing policy, because to be honest, I don't think he's really cut through on that, has he? I don't really know what he's advocating with immigration other than he wants to reduce it. What's his detailed plan there? I'll have a closer look to see what they're promising and how they could, not that I'm necessarily giving them free advice, but I'd be interested to see what they actually could do to push back on One Nation that isn't just, they're just going to wreck the country and spend too much money, put up interest rates. So I think it forces us to focus on, well, what are the substandard policy issues? So that's what I've taken out of it. How about you?
Yeah, well, I just commenting on what you're saying there, I always like the idea of putting yourself in the shoes of someone who you may not agree with, you may hate, but just think, what would you do there? So I like that you're going to dive there. I also like this that you said you're not going to provide any free advice, which, indicates that you will provide the advice if they pay enough. So there you go, Liberal Party boffins. It is for sale. Look, I thought it was interesting what you raised about the Uber Eats and that sort of door drop stuff. So that was that's one thing that I think gets underappreciated ever since Howard's work choices exploded the Liberal Party. Then everyone's been basically too scared to seriously touch IR, industrial relations, labor markets. People shy away from discussing it because they know it's not going to be popular. And because they've shied away so much, we keep sleepwalking step by step into worse and worse policies that we're all going to pay for, right? They're not actually going to work well for the country, but we are too scared to talk about them. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Well, Well, what annoys me is that, like, the current government is essentially it just campaigns on, oh, well, we've lifted wages, where you're getting a pay rise because of us, and it's like, well, is that right? I mean, like, no, I don't think so. I mean, maybe they can push up nominal wages, but if there's not the underlying productivity, then that's going to be inflationary, and the real wages are not going to increase. They've lost what the Labor government of the 80s, what Hawke and Keating understood, what the union leaders at the time, Bill Kelty and Laura, was it Ferguson? What they understood was there's no point just pushing up nominal wages if there's no underlying productivity gains. All you're going to do is either generate inflation or generate unemployment. It's just madness. But this government doesn't seem to get it. But previous Labor governments, which have had sensible people and with economic understanding, actually got this. And we're a long way from that now, which is really unfortunate.
That's very true. Look, the government deserves to get wrapped on the knuckles for not appearing not to understand this. But I mean, that has to go both ways, because the coalition has dropped the ball.
True.
The oppositions of all stripes have dropped the ball. And Andrew Bragg, to his credit, from the Liberal Party, has come out and said that we've dropped the ball not prosecuting this case. We should be prosecuting this case again. So it'll be interesting. There's going to be a renewed effort from the coalition to say something about this topic. But you're right, like just tying wages to productivity, which was such an obvious and important innovation from the 1980s Labor Party. And now no one even talks about it like that anymore. Right? It's not mentioned in the conversation. So yes, as Ardub says, this is what you get when a treasurer has a PhD on a speech. Has PhD on a speech? A PhD in politics is the problem. The treasurer is.
Well, I think he's got a PhD in Paul Keating, or Paul Keating's leadership. So I suppose probably Keating did give some good speeches. Like, he was a very good speaker. So I imagine maybe his thesis did. I'll have to look at it. I've never read it, Chalmers' thesis.
Actually, maybe that's the point. Maybe it was all about just Keating's speeches, but
it was probably on the Redfern. I mean, people talk about the Redfern speech. He gave various, he was a very eloquent man, Keating.
Quite a bright guy. But he was wrong about super. We should never have had compulsory super. But anyway, I digress. We'll do that another time as well. Let's hop out of here before we hit the 2-minute mark. Gene, thank you as always for joining me.
Thank you, John.
Listeners, thank you for bearing with us. We do this every Thursday evening at 8 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. This is put on by the Australian Taxpayers Alliance, taxpayers.org.au, or on Substack, Oz Taxpayers, that's AUS, taxpayers.substack.com. Please go there, check out what we're doing, check out our campaigns and various things we're about. Please go and find us on the social medias, the Facebook, X, YouTube, especially go to YouTube, give us a follow there. It really does help. So thank you for joining us, as always. Until next week, stay happy and stay free.